Hi everybody, it's Kevin at Bear Creek. Happy spring. Today is March 21st, 2019. Beautiful day out today. Right now it's probably about 37 degrees, supposed to get up to 45. Sort of amazing. In Wisconsin here we consider that to be the beautiful day, rather than the 60, 70, 80 degree days. One of the things I wanted to talk about today, wintering beekeeping, is we've always got to learn and adjust to our wintering strategies in the every year, every single year, to try to get our colonies through winter, because that is absolutely, for me, the most difficult thing I can do. I have to do as a beekeeper. So much work is put in all summer long, feeding the bees and keeping them up and everything like that, and all winter long I can't touch them, can't do anything to them, and then you lose 60-70% of your hives, and that's just it's a real downer. I've been talking to quite a few beekeepers. I was at my local beekeeping club and meeting, and they were talking about, guys talking about 80% losses, some with 100, obviously, if you only had a few hives, but guys with lots of hives with 80% losses this winter. It was brutal winter, but we've always got to learn and adapt. And the steps, as I've been observing my bees over the last couple of years, in the winter time, what works, what doesn't work. I created a list. I call it my winter beekeeping manifesto. And I wanted to share that with you before I get into the rest of this video. So I wrote them down and I wanted to share it with you. There's 10 items on this list, but it all starts even before that with a good, might want to start with a winter hardy queen, such as a Carniolan or a Russian, and even better yet, a locally, regionally produced queen. Might be a mutt from Carniolans, might be a mutt from Russians, whatever your choice is. It's always good to start with that. Some type of bee from a northern climate that has a propensity to build up stores in the winter, in the fall, shut down brood rearing in the winter, stays in a tight cluster all winter, is not active. They're not rearing brood, they're not active, they're not out at the front entrance when it's 20 below, and then by the time March rolls around they're the size of a softball. That's not really what we're after. We want a low playing type queen that will produce bees that will use very little of the resources in the hive, and come spring they'll have plenty for spring buildup. Instead of having to coddle them with lots and lots of sugar, mountain camp, or whatever you decide. I see the bees are even more active as it warms up here. So you got to start with that. And then I'll run down my list of my 10 things that I think need to happen to successfully winter a hive. Number one is effective mite control in the fall. If you don't get an effective mite treatment and check on those mite loads going into the fall, I don't think you're going to be have a healthy colony come out in spring. It's just one of those things. That's just my take on it. Now there's treatment-free guys out there. Now everything is dependent on treatment-free. It depends on what you call treatment-free. If you do brood breaks and stuff like that, well then going into fall maybe your mite load wasn't that great, so you're okay in that regard. But it's still a treatment nonetheless. I used in the fall, after my honey supers came off, I used Apivar strips, and I put them in the end of August or beginning of September, and I left them in. I did. I didn't see any reason I needed to take them out. Number two, it doesn't seem to matter what size colony you have. If your cavities are too big, the bees can get off of the honey very easily in the winter, and they can starve in literally 2 days. Every single one of my double deep 10 frame hives perished this year, except one. You can't see it, but it's off here to my right, and all that's left in that colony was a frame and a half of bees left after I intervened, and I took one of the hive bodies off earlier this year. I think a week ago or a week and a half ago I took that hive body off, just so that they can stay in contact, the cluster can stay in contact with the honey. They don't move off the honey and get caught when it drops down to 20 some below. They might be, you know, half of them might be over here, half of them might be over here, but this half is not in contact with honey. If, you know, we get a 20 below for a week and they'll die. Okay, so keeping them in contact with honey is a good thing. I just think that the configuration, if you're going into winter with a 10 frame box, a single, all my singles made it. My singles with a super are actually some of my best hives right now. That one back there is a single and super, and it came out of winter, and I think I've got 9 frames of bees on it right now. My other single and super has 6 frames of bees, so that's pretty good, and it's just something that I've noticed. I've also listened to other beekeepers who said, you know, it seems counterintuitive that you know, having double deep box full of honey won't keep your bees safe all winter. But because there's so much space, they can get off the honey so quickly. It's just one of those things. So it's a lower percentage, lower survival percentage in a double. Only from my perspective, and I'm talking about my apiary here in Wisconsin, in central Wisconsin. But nukes seem to work better. You have your best percentage chance of getting them through winter. Like I said, narrower space, nice size colony. They can't really move off of honey, so the cluster will always stay in contact with the honey, which is probably why it's easier to winter a nuke than any other configuration. You know, I've never tried 8 frames, but I'll bet you that's easier to get a hive through winter than a 10 frame. But so keep that in mind. Colony size matters, and I've seen this, and I can't stress this enough, and I've tried this a couple years in a row here. If you go into the winter trying to get through a dink colony, a weak colony, you know, maybe by putting it in one 5 frame nuke box and that's it, I think you have a very, very minuscule chance of getting that colony through winter. I have tried it. This winter I had probably 4 or 5 hives that were dinks that I tried to get through, and none of them made it. The best advice I can give for that regard is to, if you find a weak colony, either figure out a way that you can take resources off another hive and help them out going into fall, or just combine them totally. Get rid of the queen of the weak hive and combine them totally with another hive, and maybe another small hive, and that way the two together are strong enough and they can go into winter. Number one, they can't get to stores together in the winter to fill up all the comb full of honey. They need lots of bees pulling in lots of nectar, and not every bee pulls in nectar. You know, some of them are rear and brood, so you know there's only so many bees doing the resources. Even if you're feeding them, you put that bucket right on top of them, and they just can't pull enough down by the time it gets too cold. So my advice for that matter is, if you have small, weak colonies, combine them with another one or two or whatever it is, to try to get at least one of them, you know, through winter. Number 5 is this is a mistake that I made, but I'll never make this again. Weigh the hives in the winter. You know, weigh them empty so you know what your target is going to be. If you weigh them empty, then you know, okay, let's say this all these boxes empty weighs 40 pounds. I'm just guessing here. And I know I want 50 to 60 pounds of honey on top of them. Well, now I know my target for the fall going in, probably, you know, October, is going to be 100 pounds. That's what I want to weigh them on. You can tip the scale. You could tip this on a bathroom scale. You can get contraptions that with a hanging scale and a strap, and just pick them up just slightly off the and weigh them that way. There's various ways to do it, but that's my advice. And that way, let's say that you have a hive that's at 80 pounds. You know, you can heft it up, but you can't tell the difference between 80 pounds and 100. I'm sorry, you might be good, but you're not that good. And you might think, oh, that's fine. Well, now you're 20 pounds late of honey. So the best thing to do is to say, okay, well, this hive needs 20 pounds of honey. So now I know I got to give them 3 gallons or 2 gallons of sugar syrup, you know, to get them to weight. Now I don't have to put 5 gallons on them thinking that that's what they need, or overfeed them or anything. I have a target set. So that's another piece of advice. Number 6 is to keep sugar bricks on top of the colony. I was going to bring one out and I forgot to bring it. My candy board, to show you. I have an inverted sugar board, and I'm going to tweak on that a little bit too. But always keep a sugar board or candy or a sugar brick on top of the bees for emergency purposes only. And you know, if they go up there and start eating on it right away, so what? They'll still have the honey below, and they'll still be in contact. But keeping food on top of them, they will always have food above them, and that's a very, very important point. You always want to have food on top of them, so that they don't have to leave cluster to go get it. Venting. This is under valued item that I think is significant, and it gets more significant as the winter progresses, and I'll tell you why. I do an upper and a lower vent on my bees. I used not queen excluders, but I used entrance reducers on all my hives this year. And the problem that you're going to run into with entrance reducers is, as the bees die over the winter, they're going to actually clog up that lower entrance. And then all you're going to have is the upper entrance. And that's fine, but it's not going to reduce the moisture in the hive as easily or as well as having an upper and a lower. Just my opinion in the matter. So making sure that lower entrance is clear is key. I used a queen excluder this year on some hives. I will not do that. I will not make that mistake again. Now I realize that the bees, you know, in a tree, they only have a hole that's that big, and that seems to work out great for them. But you know, we're putting these bees in an unnatural spot. So wide open is what I'm going, and then I will jam. Here, I'll show you. This hardware cloth right here in the lower entrance, and that's just on the hives with the Langstroth, typical Langstroth bottoms. This is number 4 hardware cloth for a mouse guard, and this is very important too. Mouse guard. You definitely want mouse guards on your hives. but it provides adequate venting. If it gets clogged up, there's still areas that you can still get airflow through the hive. So it's very, very important to keep air flowing through the hive and upper. The one thing I ran into when my lower entrance got clogged up, moisture started building up inside the hives at a higher rate, and then bees started dying between the frames, and that actually stopped airflow moving up. And actually on some of my entrances, it actually clogged the entrance. The bees were actually started getting wet and died, and all those bees saturate as they rot. They saturate with water. They hold the water in. The water can't go anywhere. And then more bees will die, and then you'll discover it in March when you start feeding them pollen patties that you have this ventilation problem. So venting is key, and try to make your configuration so that the entrances won't block up, especially the lower entrance. And upper entrance is very, very important. Most of the time, if you use the candy board with the hole, you won't have that problem on the upper entrance. I'll actually show you another mistake I made here. This is a 5-frame nuke box, and this was the bottom box to that hive right there, to that nuke box there. And this hive rocked all winter. Never saw the bees out. They were slow playing their stores. When it got above 40, then they'd come out and they'd do an orientation flight, and there was a ton of bees, and they stayed in a lower box for the longest time. Then they moved to this second box. I mean, they're seriously, they slow played their stores. Well, come March, I had put a couple of candy bricks up on top, and I pulled the cover off, and it was soaking wet on top, and I couldn't figure it out because all my other hives were dry as a bone, and it's the same configuration. So what? Why? One of the things that I did wrong, this is a 5-frame hive, okay? So that means that your center frame obviously sits in the middle. Well, that's where I drilled my hole for my entrance. And my entrance was right behind the end of a frame. And in the summertime, it's not that big a deal. It's a 1/4-inch space. They got through, and they used it all summer long, and they're active, and they're pulling dead bees, and it's just not that big of a deal. But all winter long, you start getting bees dying, and they start stacking up in here, and they stacked up between the frames. The bees could no longer get to this lower entrance, and it blocked off from getting any airflow through this. And then the hive started getting wet in here, and more bees started dying. And every one of my entrance holes was right at the center and the back of the frame right here. It hit right here. So I was literally having no venting in my hive. And if you look behind me right there, there's a mountain of bees, probably 3 pounds of dead bees that I pulled out of that hive, or out of this box, and in between frame, actually out of this box from that hive. There's still a ton of bees in there, don't get me wrong, and that hive is going to survive, and they're doing okay. They have plenty of stores, but they lost 3/4 of their colony because they didn't have good venting. So what I ended up doing was, and I wanted to talk to you about, we've always got to adapt. So I pulled this bottom box off. I put a normal Langstroth bottom on that so that it cleared. I dumped out all the dead bees, obviously. All these frames were empty anyway, so it was not a useful box to have on it anyways. But I put a cork in the hole here, and then I changed it up. So I ended up putting the hole here between the first and second frame, so that it's a clear shot, and it should never get clogged up with bees like that again. The cluster can kind of clear out the bees. So that's a lesson learned, and just, you know, you got to adapt. And so all my boxes that were like this with the hole in the center, I changed to this configuration. But unfortunately for that colony, it was too little, too late. Another, and I've talked about this in other videos, that you don't need, I think, a quilt box and all that kind of stuff is overkill. You know, if you've got lots of hives, it's just not cost effective. Plus, you got to store all those quilt boxes. It's just not necessary when an 1.5, 2-inch piece of foam board is all you need on to sit on the top of the box. I don't have one sitting on this one because this is just a demonstration hive, but I do have them on both of these hives here. And the hive behind, actually you can see the white on the top of the candy board there. That's styrofoam insulation. So putting styrofoam right underneath your lids, and between that and your whatever, your candy board or the top of your box, to stop thermal shock from cold hitting moist warm air and condensating on the top and forming moisture. You know, moisture can form from several things, but that's the major way to reduce moisture at the top of your hive. On the sides, it really doesn't matter that much. And then wrap your hives with your choice of tar paper, Reflectix, or something to tape up the seams, so that you know, we bust these seams open in the fall or anything like that, and bees don't have time to propolize it. So, you know, the wind can get through. So you can tape the seams. That's fine, I guess, if you want. Here in Wisconsin, I feel better for myself. Like the Reflectix in the hive behind you, I haven't taken that off yet. I wrapped the hives with that, and that seemed to do fine for me. But it's your choice. Tar paper absorbs solar heat when the sun's out. When the sun's not out, it doesn't do much, and it doesn't do much at night either. The Reflectix actually reflects the heat from the bees generate inside the hive kind of back to them, so it always keeps the hive at a constant temperature. And that's the reason, that's the theory, and that's the reason why I go with Reflectix. So that was my 10 items that I've come up with to help with better beekeeping in the winter. And now what I wanted to do was to go over with you, like I said, about we need to adapt as we learn every single winter to the things that we've observed over the winters as we winter bees. You know, we get mild winters, we get brutal winters, but I think if you prepare for the worst every time, we'll all be more successful at keeping our bees with the ability to make it through the winter. Now, I've showed this to you over the past in my past videos with my German hive bottoms, and one of the things that I've talked about here about the venting and the bees, the dead bees piling up in the bottom, can be alleviated by this German hive bottom that I'm using here, and I just kind of wanted to show it to you. This configuration, actually, I'll just pull this off. This is just the screen, and that's going to be sort of how the winter configuration is. So in the wintertime, let's say late fall, after you've you've fed your bees and you've got them all tucked away with the right amount of honey, one of the last things for these German hive bottoms is to come in here, you lift your box up a little bit, and you come in and you slide out the hive bottom, okay? And that way, so you can see this, let me tip this up so you can see it. Whoop. Hopefully you can see that. So that way the cluster can hang down into this box right here, okay? And there's plenty of space for them. You know, the board is out of the way, and then I'll show you. And I just wanted to show you for demonstration how I would remove that lower board, and then I would drop this back down, and they would be tucked. They would be good for the winter from then on. Okay, they're closed off here. They're closed off in the front with just a little small entrance in the front, and I'm just talking about they're closed off from the weather, so they can heat this space up. But here's the benefit of the German hive bottom that I hadn't talked before. Actually, here's the insulation that I had on there, so just so you can see it. But anyways, so here's the configuration as it stands right now. The notch is right here for your entrance and your bottom entrance and exit. Now the good thing about this is, with the bees hanging down here, it does not matter how many bees pile up down here, they will never block off. They will never pile up big enough to block off this entrance right here. So they can pile up there all you want. I mean, you can go in to the back here and remove the back and clean them out if you want, but it's not blocking the airflow. The airflow will come in and go up, but the dead bees will sit down here and will never block up this entrance. That's the beauty of this. That's the beauty of this system right here. Okay. Now you may have noticed that I've got these little clips in place here, and that is so that when I am transporting it, the deep that sits on top of here won't slide around a little bit and slide off while I'm moving my hives from one location to the other. So, whoops. That sets on just like that, and now this literally cannot move off. And then I can strap it down. We're good to go. You know, when I'm transporting it, I'm sort of getting off topic here, but when I'm transporting it, I just throw this on, and we're good to roll. So I hope you got something out of this. That's my thoughts on wintering bees, and our need to adapt each year to try to get better, so that we can get our bees through these harsh upper Midwest winters. So till next time, happy beekeeping and happy spring. Go get the bird. Where's the bird?